Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take that massive pile of sources you've shared with us, the articles, the detailed research notes, the psychological profiles, and we try to synthesize it all into the essential, fascinating core of the story.
And today, that core is deeply unnerving. We're not dealing with abstract concepts here. We are stepping into what is basically a true Gothic narrative set in troubled Pennsylvania.
Trouble, Pennsylvania. You can't make that up.
You really can't. And specifically, we're going inside the isolated walls of a place called Seaton House.
That's right. Our mission for you today is heavy, but the resolution is so satisfying because it peels back this supernatural layer to reveal something, frankly, much more chillingly human.
Right.
We are here to synthesize the entire narrative surrounding Seaton House, resolving the mystery of its terrifying haunting and revealing a decade-spanning, multi-generational plot of revenge.
And that plot is rooted firmly in dark history, not in the paranormal.
Exactly. Not a ghost in sight, really.
What's fascinating immediately is how our source material combines such diverse elements. You've got a 1930s serial killer, a modern-day armed robbery, intense psychological warfare, and deep personal trauma.
It's a wild mix.
It is. This isn't just a ghost story. It's more like a procedural investigation into how human malice can actually use trauma as a weapon.
Okay, let's unpack this opening setup then. We have two key protagonists whose lives just collide at Seaton House. And they're the definition of opposite poles. And their immediate tension really drives the entire plot forward. First up, we have Simon Lebeaux, the current owner of the house.
Simon is just the picture of isolation. He retreated to this massive, forbidding 42-room mansion after a really traumatic, violent incident in Charleston, South Carolina.
Right.
So when we meet him, he is not just physically scarred, but mentally shattered. He's dealing with these chronic, severe headaches, migraines, so bad the sources describe them as almost physical events.
And the memories.
Oh, the memories of that night are just on a loop every single day.
Yeah, the sources describe them so vividly. Things like still frame snapshots of memory that tormented him, or like a never-ending horror movie.
Exactly. So this isn't just some general trauma. This is specific, acute, post-traumatic stress that dictates his every interaction, his every thought.
And this is a man who used to write guidebooks. His whole life was about exploring the world.
A man of the world, now completely walled off from it.
And that isolation is really the key to his vulnerability, isn't it?
It's everything, because he's already battling this profound guilt over having taken a life, even though it's clearly in self-defense, when strange things start happening in the house.
He doesn't look for an external culprit.
No, not at all. He immediately thinks the moving objects, the strange sounds, that it's all proof he's losing his mind. He feels he's broken,
Maybe even that he deserves it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that he deserves this suffering. So he's actively hiding from the world in trouble, of all places.
He's already primed to accept the narrative of madness, because his greatest fear is confronting the violence he was capable of, even though it's justified.
And then into this highly volatile, isolated vacuum
Steps Lottie Santori.
Yes, Lottie Santori. She's the perfect antidote to Simon's self-destructive introspection.
She's introduced to us as this sharp journalism grad student from Chicago, and I love the description of her. It's wonderfully unsubtle. She has a big mouth, a dirty mind,
And most importantly, she's incredibly adept at research and solving puzzles.
she is the grounding force that Simon desperately needs. She comes from this large, protective Italian family. They run Santori's pizza joint.
Which is just the opposite of Seaton House.
Totally. Her background is steeped in warmth, community, and this loud, inescapable reality. Her initial job is purely academic, right? She's just there to research the house's dark, forgotten past for her thesis.
And what's fascinating here is that Lottie doesn't believe in ghosts. She doesn't believe in magic. Her entire framework is facts, data, human motivation.
A researcher's mind.
Exactly. She sees the world through that lens. And this inherent skepticism, combined with her just deep-seated ability to connect disparate pieces of information, that's what's ultimately going to pull Simon out of his psychological trap.
So we have the trauma-shattered hermit versus the fiercely grounded researcher, and they're converging on a house that is just steeped in genuine recorded tragedy.
It's the perfect setup.
Let's move to the stage itself then. Let's talk about Seaton House.
Seaton House is absolutely a character in this story. It's not just a big building.
Yeah.
It's a sprawling, imposing structure perched on a stark private mountain towering over the small town below, which, again, gives the town its perfect name, Trouble, Pennsylvania.
And it had 42 guest rooms originally.
42. It's massive. And the location itself speaks to a kind of hubris. It was built to be grand and aloof, you know.
Right, separate from everyone else.
But its history immediately signaled tragedy. The sources remind us that the original millionaire owner, after erecting this palace, lost everything in the 1929 stock market crash.
And he ended his life how?
By jumping off the cliff. Right on the property. It cemented this dark foundation for the house's entire subsequent history.
So that set the ominous tone, but the real shadow hanging over the estate, the one that matters for our story, emerged in the 1930s.
With the tenure of Joseph Zangara.
Joseph Zangara.
Zangara, whom the sources deem the forgotten killer, is the historical root of this whole conflict. He was described as charming, highly handsome, charismatic, a prince of a man.
And he ran the mansion as a hotel during the Depression?
A successful hotel, yes. He often hired local, destitute women as chambermaids or service staff. He was really presented as a kind of community savior.
Boosting the economy of Trouble, Pennsylvania, during one of the hardest decades in American history.
And this is where the sinister detail emerges, the connection. He ran the hotel with his business partner, a man named Robert Stubbs.
And Robert Stubbs turns out to be
Simon Lebeau's great-grandfather.
There it is.
That financial and familial link is crucial. But Zangara's true identity was far darker. While he was playing the gracious host, he was secretly a serial killer.
Kidnapping and murdering at least 15 women.
At least 15. And these were the same chambermaids and shop girls from the town that he claimed he was helping. He buried their bodies right on the grounds along the cliffs.
He was eventually caught.
Caught, convicted, and electrocuted. But here's the interesting historical footnote that Lottie is focusing on for her thesis. Despite the high body count, the brazen nature of the crimes, the location, a major American hotel.
Zangara is basically forgotten.
Surprisingly obscured, yeah. He's rarely mentioned alongside names like Gacy or Bundy in the annals of major 20th century murderers.
And you have to ask why. Was it just overshadowed by the Depression?
That's one theory. Or did the local authorities in the town of Trouble consciously suppress the details to protect their reputation? Whatever the reason, his forgotten status is exactly what the modern-day perpetrators are banking on.
It provides the perfect historical shroud for their ghost plot.
Precisely. And this historical darkness, it provides the immediate logical cover for the psychological torment Simon starts to experience.
Ever since he inherited the property from his late Uncle Roger.
Right. Simon faces phenomena that seem almost custom-designed to attack his already fragile mental state. They're highly specific, almost theatrical hauntings.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, he hears the movement of objects, the constant low-level scratches and whiskery noises in the walls, a sound that just preys on the fear of things unseen.
Things in the structure.
Exactly.
Right.
And there are these sudden, localized blasts of intense, frigid air, particularly in the long hallways, which immediately drop the temperature to near freezing.
But the sensory details are what truly confuse him, right? The smells.
Oh, yeah. He smells specific phantom odors of cloves and citrus mixed with this scent of secrets and age. They're so specific and persistent that he initially attributes them to the medical warnings his doctors gave him.
About his migraine.
About pre-migraine auras. He's essentially pathologizing the haunting. He's convincing himself it's a symptom of his own broken biology.
It's the most logical explanation for him at the time.
It is. But the most elaborate and chilling psychological trick, however, concerns the third floor. This is where the house truly seems sentient, truly occupied by something spectral.
Tell us about the beds, because that's a truly unnerving detail from the source material.
Okay, so Simon goes up to the third floor, which had been locked and unused for months, to investigate a loud banging noise.
And he finds the doors to several former guest rooms just open.
Mysteriously open. Rooms that should have been sealed. And inside, the beds, which hadn't been slept in for years, bore the rumpled indentation of a human form.
That's so creepy.
The sources describe them as looking as if the long-departed guests had just awakened from their deep, restless sleep.
It suggests the immediate physical presence of the dead. But Simon confirms that the keys to those rooms, these heavy antique keys, they were still locked away.
Locked away and undisturbed in his office safe. This is not just a ghost moving a sheet. This is a calculated physical act of intrusion.
Designed to make him doubt the reality of his own locked, secure environment.
Yes. It elevates the psychological warfare far beyond simple bumps in the night. And that level of calculated intrusion tells us the perpetrator is highly motivated, highly skilled, and has intimate knowledge of the house's layout and security weaknesses.
It is a brilliant piece of psychological theater staged for an audience of one.
An audience of one who's already struggling with his sanity.
To truly appreciate the success of this gaslighting operation, we have to look closely at the traumatic event that made Simon so vulnerable in the first place.
The attack in Charleston.
Exactly. This incident, just months prior, was the catalyst for his deep isolation.
Before this event, Simon was successful, he was active, engaged with the world, he was a successful travel guide writer, known for his Guide to Southern Cities series, and he had a well-regarded syndicated column, Tales of the Traveler.
His life revolved around exploration and connection.
And he was in Charleston for research when, on his last night, he went to a hotel bar and made what he later saw as this critical error.
He picked up a blonde woman.
He did. It seemed like a casual encounter, but she was not what she seemed. She was part of a meticulously planned armed robbery. She was soon joined by a burly male accomplice with a gun.
And while they initially took his valuables, money, credit cards, his laptop, the situation quickly escalated.
It went way beyond simple mugging.
Yeah, the sources indicate the attackers had a far more sinister goal than just theft. They weren't looking to leave a living witness.
No. The male accomplice drove Simon to the edge of his hotel balcony, intending to throw him over to stage a suicide.
Or shoot him and then stage the scene.
Right, and this detail is crucial. It proves the premeditated malice of the attack.
So Simon, faced with certain death, fought back.
With brutal desperation. The resulting struggle was horrific and resulted in severe physical trauma for him. He sustained a knife slash that left a thin, noticeable scar across his face.
And a bullet wound to the chest.
Yeah. These were not minor injuries. They required significant recovery time, physically reinforcing the trauma over and over again.
But he managed to knock the male accomplice unconscious. The climax, though, the moment that truly broke him, involved the woman.
Linda Harrington.
Linda Harrington. In the struggle for the gun, she went over the railing to her death.
And the police investigation ultimately ruled the entire incident a clear case of self-defense. Simon was legally cleared.
But the trauma of taking a life, even justified.
It left him emotionally shattered. He felt like a killer. He wasn't haunted by the law, he was haunted by the blood on his hands.
He couldn't reconcile the successful, charming travel writer with the violent survivor who had killed someone.
No. The memories, the fear, the pain, the smell of blood, the sound of her falling, and the vision of her crushed body, they just tortured him nightly.
So moving to Seaton House, this isolated 42-room echo chamber of tragedy, was his attempt to disappear.
But by seeking isolation, he made himself the ideal, psychologically fragile target for a new, insidious attack. He brought his own emotional vulnerability right to the doorstep of Trouble, Pennsylvania.
A man who has already been pushed to the edge of violence, who views himself as morally compromised.
Is perfectly susceptible to suggestion, especially the suggestion that he is simply going insane.
And this is where Lottie's arrival marks the beginning of Simon's salvation. She shows up during a severe storm, and Simon, in his gruff, hermit persona, tries desperately to send her away.
He's immediately convinced she's either a nuisance or, given his annihilated trust in women, some kind of escort.
Which just shows you the depth of his broken worldview.
Completely. He's trying to expel the outside world, but Lottie, driven by her research and leveraging her professor's guaranteed reservation, forces her way in.
Simon allows her to stay, grudgingly, just viewing her as this irritating interruption.
But her presence has an immediate, profound effect. Simon, who has been tortured nightly by trauma, notes that he finally sleeps one night without hearing screams or tasting blood.
Wow.
Lottie's sheer force of grounded, living reality acts as an instant psychological barrier against the ghosts of his past.
The attraction is immediate and intensely distracting for him. And Lottie, for her part, she's very observant.
Very. She notes his physique, lean, hard, and she sees the deep scars, the physical signs of the trauma he carries.
This creates an immediate mix of attraction, intense curiosity, and a surprisingly protective concern in her.
Yeah, she senses the danger he carries, both external and internal.
However, the psychological warfare doesn't just stop because she's there. It actually shifts focus.
It escalates. It escalates into genuine physical threats targeted at Lottie as well, presumably to drive them both out or kill them both.
The villain must have realized that Lottie's presence was disrupting the psychological operation.
Right. So the initial phase moves from subtle gaslighting to clear, malicious intent. We see this with the terrifying attic incident.
Okay, tell us about that.
Lottie goes up to the dark attic for research. She takes a key to ensure she can lock and unlock the door herself. Yet, when she tries to leave, the door is inexplicably locked from the outside.
She's trapped.
She is trapped. And in her panic, trying to find a working light, she attempts to unscrew a hot light bulb in the dark stairwell. She scrapes and burns her fingers, resulting in those telling small red blisters.
And the lock on that door was key-operated.
Key-operated, meaning someone had to be physically present to lock her in, which confirms the human element.
Then we have the near-fatal carriage incident. This one requires mechanical knowledge and perfect timing.
Yes. An antique carriage, which serves as a backyard decoration, is secured by these large wooden blocks to prevent it from moving.
And yet, on the slick, wet lawn,
it suddenly begins rolling, gathering momentum straight toward the cliff's edge where Lottie is standing.
And Simon saves her.
He does. Reacting with that combat instinct he developed in Charleston, he races out and tackles her behind a large boulder just as the heavy vehicle rolls past and over the edge.
These aren't just pranks. These are escalating attempts on their lives.
Designed to look like unfortunate accidents or potentially a shared suicide pact between two traumatized people.
Lottie also observes smaller, more subtle occurrences that solidify her suspicions, right?
She does. She finds her bed mysteriously perfectly made, like quarter-bouncing perfect when she knows she left it rumpled.
Which confirms that someone is repeatedly accessing her room on the 3rd floor, even with the door locked.
It demonstrates access to keys or bypass knowledge. But the absolute turning point, the real moment of clarity, occurs when Simon, at the end of his emotional rope, finally confesses.
He tells her the things that make him doubt his sanity the most.
He tells Lottie his darkest secret. He saw the dead blonde attacker, Linda Harrington, standing by the cliffs, illuminated by this strange light. And he saw the actual crime scene photo of her crushed body appear on his laptop screen one night.
He's confessing to hallucinations. He genuinely believes he's seeing ghosts and losing his grip on reality.
And then he tells Lottie about the phantom spicy odor, the cloves and citrus, that he believes signals his oncoming migraines. And then he realizes the truth. That same heavy, spicy perfume was undeniably present on Lottie's belongings when he entered her room earlier. The smell wasn't a hallucination. The scent was real.
And here's where Lottie's journalism skills and her refusal to embrace the supernatural just cut through decades of historical and personal trauma.
She takes all the data, the moving beds, the strange smells, the accidents, the hallucination of the dead woman, and she synthesizes the critical, grounding insight.
She looks at this trauma-shattered man who believes he's hallucinating his dead attacker and gives him the only truth that can save him.
She says, and this is the direct quote, "Simon, honey, someone is fucking with you."
That one line, it reframes everything.
Everything, from a terrifying haunting to a clear-cut case of calculated, targeted gaslighting.
That phrase is a total game changer. The entire mission of this deep dive shifts right here. The goal is no longer to survive a haunting, but to identify and stop a very human, very dangerous antagonist.
Someone who is systematically trying to dismantle Simon's mind and body.
So Lottie immediately theorizes that a highly sophisticated sick person has been spying on Simon since he arrived.
And capitalizing on his isolation and his known trauma from Charleston. The goal, to drive him out of the house, or failing that, to drive him insane so he would commit suicide, allowing them to take the property.
Let's elaborate on the technical aspects, because this is where Lottie's analysis moves from psychology to actual evidence. She analyzes the methods beautifully.
And they are all rooted in exploiting Simon's neglect. She determines that the open doors, moving objects, and sounds were simple mischief. Maybe a highly complex set of tripwires or subtle key manipulations.
But the visual proof, like the Charleston crime photo appearing on his laptop screen,
that was achieved through a simple yet devastating remote desktop takeover.
And this is a crucial detail from the source. Simon's home network had no firewall whatsoever.
None. As a travel columnist, he likely relied on easy, open network access everywhere he went. He came to Seaton House and focused on hiding from people, not on digital security.
He wasn't thinking about cybersecurity.
Not at all. So exploiting legacy software or an outdated network protocol, which is common in old houses recently refurbished, makes a remote desktop takeover an easy move for someone with basic hacking skills.
So Louisa Mitchell didn't need to be some master hacker.
No, she just needed to exploit Simon's negligence and lack of protection. The visual hallucination wasn't a ghost. It was a high-resolution JPEG appearing on his screen from a remote server designed specifically to trigger his PTSD.
And the olfactory attack. The spicy scent of cloves and citrus. Lottie determines this was likely piped into the air vents. How would that even work?
Well, Seaton House is a massive, antiquated structure with an old, likely easily accessible HVAC system. It would have been relatively simple for someone to insert a small, remote-controlled diffuser hidden in a vent on the third floor near Simon's main living area and use it to blast that specific, custom-designed fragrance.
And the scent was chosen very deliberately.
Oh, incredibly deliberately. It was chosen not just for its historical significance, but because it mimicked the heavy perfume Linda Harrington wore in Charleston. And more directly, because it was known to be a severe trigger for Simon's migraines.
That level of calculation using chemical triggers combined with psychological imagery, it moves this from simple haunting to deliberate, targeted torture.
Absolutely. The accidents, the attic lock, the carriage were simply the final, escalating physical attempts to force his departure or death.
So armed with this newfound understanding, Simon stops fearing ghosts and starts investigating a human criminal.
Finally, he digs into his late Uncle Roger's records and finds notes regarding a potential buyer, identified only as LM.
And LM was harassing his uncle to sell the house shortly before Roger's death.
Harassing him so much that Roger had even started legal paperwork to bar her from ever staying at the hotel again.
And the guest ledger provides the full name.
Louisa Mitchell, a regular visitor who stayed 6 separate times in the months leading up to June. And Uncle Roger Denton died the day after her last documented visit.
The immediate suspicion is clear. Louisa Mitchell murdered his uncle to get the house.
Likely realizing Simon, the next heir, would be even harder to convince to sell. But the motive is still a little fuzzy. Why this desperate, murderous need for this specific property?
That's where Lottie's research skills finally connect the dots across 3 generations.
Using Google, of all things, she finds an obscure local article about Joseph Zangar's widow celebrating her 100th birthday. The article listed her great-grandchildren.
And the revelation is chilling. The list of Zangar's great-grandchildren included not only Louisa Mitchell, the woman currently trying to murder them,
but also Linda and Joseph Harrington, the armed robbers and attempted murderers from Charleston.
Wow, it all connects.
It all connects. The entire haunting was not a random act of criminality. It was a carefully calculated generational revenge plot orchestrated by Joseph Zangar's descendants. Their family legacy was humiliation and loss.
The sources indicate the Zangara family blamed Robert Stubbs, Simon's great-grandfather, and Zangar's business partner for Zangar's eventual capture.
And for forcing him to sell his share of the lucrative hotel at a rock-bottom price after his arrest. Zangara had even reportedly swore revenge, a curse upon your house, before his execution.
And that grudge was carried, nurtured, and activated across 3 generations.
So Linda and Joseph Harrington didn't target Simon in Charleston simply for money. They knew exactly who he was. He was the Stubbs heir who refused to sell Seaton House.
Their mission was to eliminate him and stage it as suicide.
And when they failed, Louisa Mitchell, the mastermind, took over the operation at Seaton House to finish the job herself by driving Simon to the grave or to an institution.
It's not a story about ghosts. It's a story about a decades-old real estate vendetta rooted in 2 families who crossed paths during a heinous crime 90 years ago.
And that vendetta comes to a head in the attic, the heart of the surveillance operation.
Lottie goes back to the attic.
She does, and she hears a quiet electronic double ding sound, a precise modern sound, maybe an email notification or a network connection being closed.
And she immediately investigates, realizing this isn't the sound of an old house settling.
No. She finds a trapdoor concealed behind an old armoire, confirming this was the surveillance base, but she is immediately confronted. Louisa Mitchell, armed, emerges from the shadows.
Louisa, recognizing that her game is up, confesses her immediate intention.
To kill Lottie and stage it as Simon's suicide, a final, messy solution to the Stubbs problem. But Simon arrives, having heard the commotion, right at the critical moment.
And in the ensuing struggle, Louisa loses her footing and falls toward the precipice.
Heading straight for the cliff's edge, mirroring the fate of the original owner in 1929, this is the moment of Simon's ultimate internal reckoning.
Because he could just let her fall.
He could. Despite everything, the fact that this woman orchestrated the murder of his uncle and tried to drive him insane and kill the woman he loves, Simon risks his own life to save her from falling.
He drags her back to solid ground.
And this single definitive act proves irrevocably to himself and to Lottie that he is no killer. He rejects violence even when faced with justifiable opportunity.
And Lottie, the pragmatist, thinking fast while Simon is physically exhausted, holds the gun steady on Louisa.
right until the trouble police arrive and take the generational mastermind into custody.
So with Louisa Mitchell apprehended, the full scope of the conspiracy is revealed. Not just the emotional toll, but the true motive behind all of it.
And she confesses. She confesses to murdering Uncle Roger Denton.
But her primary motivation wasn't just generational revenge. That was almost a cover story.
Right. It was pure greed. She reveals that Joseph Zangara had mentioned a hidden stash of cash in his diary that he couldn't retrieve after his arrest.
The Zangara treasure.
The Zangara treasure. She believed it was still hidden in the house, and reclaiming the property was the only way to get it. The Zangara family believed that buried somewhere in the mansion was the financial reward that would restore their family's lost status.
So Louisa risked her life, committed murder, and orchestrated years of psychological torment, all for this physical, monetary treasure.
And Simon delivers the ultimate poetic and darkly ironic justice.
He does. He tells the police and Louisa that his family had found that stash years ago, long before Louisa even began her harassment.
His mother and uncle discovered it during a massive fire that had destroyed a section of the third floor when his mother was just a teenager.
So what did they find? Not gold bars or bundled cash.
The money was reduced to thousands of tiny bits of burned, paper-blackened like confetti. It was utterly destroyed.
So Louisa Mitchell's entire murderous scheme, the murder of Roger, the targeting of Simon, the endless psychological torture, was completely, spectacularly for nothing.
She was chasing incinerated history, a pile of black soot.
It's the ultimate anticlimax, isn't it? Decades of simmering hatred and complex, multi-state manipulation, all for nothing.
It just strips away all the grandeur of the supposed curse. The house was not haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by the corrosive, destructive persistence of human avarice.
The resolution, however, extends far beyond the criminal justice delivered to Louisa Mitchell. It's about Simon's personal recovery.
And his final, complete commitment to Lottie.
Simon, having successfully confronted his trauma, proving his innate morality by saving his attempted murderer, finally finds his emotional center.
He realizes that the isolation he sought was killing him far more certainly than Louisa Mitchell ever could. He cannot return to that solitary life. He realizes he loves Lottie, the woman who grounded him in reality.
4 weeks later, we find Lottie back home in Chicago.
Surrounded by the warmth and chaos of her massive Italian family during their Thanksgiving gathering at Santori's restaurant.
And Simon tracks her down, making this radical pivot from the isolated hermit he was.
He chooses to immerse himself in Lottie's loud, loving, overwhelming family life, the absolute antithesis of the cold, silent halls of Seaton House.
It's a monumental decision for a man who spent months hiding. And he doesn't wait for a quiet, romantic moment.
No, he proposes immediately. Right there among the clamor, the flower, the protective brothers, and the overwhelming scent of pizza.
He assures her fiercely protective family, the very people he initially feared and tried to avoid, that he is not going anywhere.
His final act is choosing community, warmth, and commitment over the self-imposed prison of isolation and trauma. The deep dive into the house's darkness led directly to light.
So what key takeaways should you carry away from this synthesized narrative? We started with a supernatural mystery, followed the research trail, and ended with a complex human vendetta.
The primary takeaway for me is the indispensable power of an external perspective, particularly when you're dealing with trauma.
Right.
Simon was utterly convinced he was going insane or being attacked by spectral forces, a victim of his own fractured psyche. Lottie's grounded research skills, her refusal to believe in anything but a logical explanation.
And her insistence on human agency.
That literally saved his life and restored his sanity.
Secondly, we see that the truth is often far more vicious and calculating than any fantasy.
Yeah. The truly terrifying, seemingly supernatural experiences, the phantom smells, the moving beds, the cold spots, were not acts of a ghost. They were the meticulously calculated, cruel work of generational human malice.
The human grudge, fueled by ancient greed, proved far more destructive than any ghost story could ever achieve.
And finally, the triumph of intuition and dedicated research. Lottie's deep-seated research instincts and her emotional connection to Simon were key to solving the entire case.
She connected a 1930s killer, a 1929 suicide, a 100-year-old birthday article, and a contemporary armed robbery into one single unified plot. She demonstrated that evidence, when you examine it without preconception, will always lead to the truth.
And this brings us to our provocative final thought, something for you to mull over after the resolution of the Zangara vendetta.
The conflict between the Zangara and Stubbs families ended with justice served, yes. but the source material hints strongly that troubled Pennsylvania remains a hotbed of intrigue and dark history.
It really does. The narrative drops names casually, almost as an aside, suggesting other lurking darkness.
The mention of Mortimer Pott's grandsons, and the specific mention that Simon and Lottie might next meet the murderous Feeney sisters' grandniece.
So if Simon and Lottie found that the history of the 1930s was actively trying to kill them in the 21st century, using advanced psychological and technical sabotage,
what kind of trouble is truly in store for the next generation of settlers or researchers when the descendants of the other notorious local villains, the Potts family, the Feeney sisters, arrive on the scene?
does the geography and name of troubled Pennsylvania itself attract violence and mystery?
Or are certain human grudges and the resulting toxicity simply too deeply rooted in history to ever truly die, forever plaguing anyone who tries to find peace in that dark, isolated mansion?
Indeed. It leaves you wondering what other dark human secrets are patiently waiting to be unearthed beneath the surface of that quiet, strangely named town.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for sharing your sources and joining us on this wild, intensely human ride through troubled Pennsylvania.